Iran just attacked a civilian oil tanker sitting in Dubai port. Not in a war zone, not near a military installation, in one of the busiest commercial harbors on the planet. And the United States responded by doing something it has not done since World War II. The next 72 hours changed this war permanently. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you will understand exactly why what just happened on the water matters more than anything that has happened on land in the last month. Monday night, Dubai port, midnight. The Al Salmi is sitting at anchor, a fully loaded Kuwaiti crude oil tanker. 2 million barrels of oil on board, $200 million worth of cargo. It is not moving. It is not a warship. It is a commercial vessel owned by Kuwait State Oil Company, crewed by 24 civilian sailors doing their jobs in a port that has spent decades building its reputation as the safest, most stable trading hub in the entire Middle East. Then the drones hit. Iranian drones struck the hull of the Al Salmi just after midnight. The explosion lit up the harbor. Sailors on tankers anchored miles away watched the fire from their bridges. Radio traffic between the Al Salmi and port authorities was being picked up across the water in real time. Other crews on other ships listening to the chaos unfold over open frequencies. One seafarer spoke to journalists afterward. He said his officers watched the explosion happen from the bridge. Hours later, when he came up himself, the fire was still going. He said it was terrible even to imagine what that crew went through. Here is the part that actually matters. The Al Salmi crew of 24 did not wait to be rescued. They fought the fire themselves, professionally, calmly. The UAE Coast Guard arrived, but by the time they got there, the crew had largely contained it themselves. 3 hours, no casualties, no oil spill. But the damage was already permanent, not to the ship, to the idea that any civilian vessel in this region is safe. Within hours of the attack, dozens of tankers in the surrounding anchorage pulled up their anchors and moved. Captains making the same calculations simultaneously. If Iran just hit a Kuwaiti tanker in Dubai port, nowhere is protected. Not neutral flags, not civilian cargo, not one of the most monitored ports on Earth. The same seafarer said it simply. He said there were dozens of loaded tankers around them, crews that had nothing to do with any of this. He said he did not know how it was going to be resolved. He said there was no safe place. Not really. That one sentence captures the moment better than any military briefing could. Iran has been attacking shipping for weeks. That part is not new. What is new is where this attack happened and what it signals. Dubai is not a combatant. The UAE has tried desperately to stay out of direct involvement in this conflict. It has watched its oil exports get choked off by the Hormuz blockade. It has absorbed economic damage quietly. It has not pointed missiles at anyone. Iran hit it anyway. In its port, against a Kuwaiti vessel, targeting a country that has also kept its military out of this fight. The message Iran was sending is that neutrality does not protect you. If you host tankers that feed economies that tolerate US and Israeli strikes on Iran, you are a target. No exemptions, no safe harbor. Crude oil prices responded immediately. Brent crude crossed $118 a barrel on Tuesday. That is a 59% surge across March alone, the largest single-month gain in recorded oil market history. West Texas Intermediate crossed $100 a barrel for the first time since 2022. Petrol above $4 a gallon in the United States. Norway cutting fuel taxes to protect citizens. Bangladesh ordering civil servants to turn off lights and air conditioning to save electricity. The EU telling member states to reduce domestic fuel consumption. A war that started as a military operation to degrade Iranian nuclear capacity is now determining whether office workers in Dhaka can afford to keep their buildings cool. That is how far this has spread. And Trump that same morning had already issued the clearest threat yet. He told Iran directly that the US would obliterate its energy plants and oil wells if Tehran did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He specifically named Karg Island, Iran's primary oil export terminal, the facility through which nearly all Iranian crude leaves the country. He posted on Truth Social telling nations that it stayed on the sidelines to go get their own oil. Hours later, the Al Salmi burned in Dubai harbor, and the US decided it was done with warnings. This is the part of the story most people have not fully processed yet. The United States Navy fired a torpedo from a submarine at an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. The first time a U.S. submarine has used a torpedo in combat since 1945. Let that number sit for a moment. 80 years. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed it directly. The target was the Iris Dina, an Iranian Navy frigate. Sri Lanka's Navy received the distress call and launched a search and rescue operation. 87 bodies recovered. 32 people pulled alive from the water. Around 60 others still unaccounted for as the search continued. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed the loss publicly. He called it an atrocity at sea. He said the Dena was carrying nearly 130 sailors and was struck in international waters without warning. He said the United States would come to bitterly regret the precedent it had just set. That is not diplomatic boilerplate. That is a direct threat from a foreign minister who just watched one of his country's warships get sunk by a weapon that has not been used in combat in 8 decades. But the torpedo was only part of what happened to Iran's Navy this week. Satellite images reviewed by independent analysts told a story that words struggle to capture. Bandar Abbas, the headquarters of the entire Iranian Navy, sitting directly on the Strait of Hormuz, smoke billowing from multiple vessels simultaneously. The Irans Makran, Iran's largest naval vessel, a drone carrier that represented the crown of Iranian maritime power projection, destroyed at dock. Images showed thick black smoke pouring from it before it was gone entirely. Konarak Naval Base in the south, multiple vessels damaged or destroyed, buildings demolished, the entire southern naval infrastructure of Iran visible from space as a field of smoke and wreckage. The Iris Bayandor, Iris Nagdi, and Iris Jamaran confirmed among the losses. The Iris Shahid Bagheri, a brand new state-of-the-art drone carrier Iran had launched just last year, reportedly sunk as well. Trump posted on Truth Social that the US had destroyed and sunk 9 Iranian naval ships, some of them relatively large and important. He said they were going after the rest. He said those remaining ships would soon be floating at the bottom of the sea too. Then he added, almost as an aside, that other than that, their navy was doing very well. Admiral Brad Cooper, head of U.S. Central Command, was more measured but equally direct. He said for decades the Iranian regime had harassed international shipping. He said that at that moment, there was not a single Iranian vessel underway in the Arabian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, or the Gulf of Oman. And he said they would not stop until that remained true. Think about what that statement actually represents. Iran's entire Gulf naval strategy was built on the premise that it could make the strait ungovernable. Fast attack boats, mines, anti-ship missiles, swarm tactics. Decades of doctrine built around the idea that Iran could deny passage to anyone it chose. The admiral overseeing American operations just said there was not one Iranian vessel still moving in those waters. But here is the thing, and this is what makes this moment genuinely complicated. Vice Admiral Mark Mellett, former head of the Irish military, told analysts that the US and Israeli strikes had largely neutralized or suppressed Iran's ability to sustain conventional attacks using its largest warships. That is the good news version of events. The harder truth is that Iran still has options: drones, mini submarines, mines planted in shipping lanes, a shadow fleet of tankers operating under obscured ownership that could be used for harassment, smaller fast attack vessels armed with anti-ship missiles that are harder to track and destroy from orbit. And Iran launched its 87th wave of regional attacks in a single month on Tuesday. This one from naval forces specifically. Iran's government called it proof that American claims of obliterating the Navy were false, that the force was still operational, that the war was still winnable from Tehran's perspective. Meanwhile, in the Strait of Hormuz itself, maritime security agencies reported 3 separate ship attacks in a single day. One vessel struck off the coast of Oman, engine room catching fire before being contained. A second tanker hit by a projectile, fire extinguished continuing its voyage. A third explosion in very close proximity to a vessel 35 miles west of Sharjah. All crew safe, but the message unmistakable. Iran cannot project power with its major warships anymore, but it can still make the strait feel dangerous. And in oil markets, feeling dangerous is almost as damaging as being dangerous. Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave an exclusive interview to Al Jazeera this week and said U.S. war objectives would be achieved in weeks, not months. He confirmed communication between Washington and Tehran is ongoing, mostly through intermediaries. He said the Strait of Hormuz would remain open regardless of Iranian actions. That sounds like confidence. But pull at that thread slightly and the picture gets more complicated. Iranian leaders told journalists they deeply distrust Washington. They believe the U.S. is not genuinely prepared for real negotiations. The gap between what Rubio describes as ongoing communication and what Tehran describes as no genuine negotiating process is not a small discrepancy. It is a fundamental disagreement about whether diplomacy is even happening. Egypt's President Sisi appeared on camera and addressed Trump directly. He said, "Please, help stop the war. You are capable of it." The leaders of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Jordan met in Jeddah and jointly condemned Iran's attacks on civilian facilities. Pakistan's foreign minister flew to Beijing for talks with Chinese counterparts following weekend meetings with diplomats from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. Quiet back-channel diplomacy is accelerating in parallel with the violence. NATO forces intercepted a missile fired from Iran toward Turkey, the fourth such interception since the war began. Turkey is a NATO member. Every time Iran fires toward Turkish territory, Article 5 of the NATO Charter becomes a conversation someone somewhere has to have. And Trump floated the idea of U.S. Navy escorts for oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Think about what that actually means operationally. American warships escorting civilian cargo vessels through a waterway where Iranian fast attack boats and drone carriers are still potentially operating. The proximity required for that kind of mission puts U.S. forces in direct contact range with anything Iran has left. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth said the coming days would be decisive. He refused to rule out a role for U.S. ground forces. More than 200 U.S. soldiers filed formal complaints about superior officers using religious rhetoric to justify the war. The internal pressure inside the American military is now visible in official complaint channels. Markets do not lie. They price in information faster than governments release it and faster than media can report it. Brent crude above $118. WTI above $100. A 59% monthly surge. These are not numbers that reflect a conflict that markets expect to end soon. These are numbers that reflect genuine uncertainty about whether the Strait of Hormuz reopens in weeks, months, or at all. The Strait handles roughly 20% of global oil and gas trade. When it closes, the entire energy architecture of the global economy shifts. Saudi Arabia has a Red Sea pipeline option that gives it some insulation. Most of its neighbors do not. The UAE's exports are nearly completely blocked. Kuwait just had its tanker burned in Dubai harbor. G7 finance ministers pledged to take all necessary measures to stabilize energy markets. That language means they do not currently have a specific plan. It means they are watching and hoping the military situation resolves before they have to intervene in ways that could themselves destabilize markets further. Norway is cutting fuel taxes. Bangladesh is turning off lights. The EU is telling people to use less fuel. These are not the responses of governments that believe this ends next week. And Trump's comment that the US might be willing to end the war even if the Strait remained closed tells you something important about the internal debate inside the White House. Publicly, the position is that the Strait must reopen. Privately, there may be a growing acknowledgement that achieving that goal militarily is harder than the initial strike plan anticipated. Here is the honest truth. The US has sunk Iran's navy, fired the first combat torpedo since World War II, and struck targets across the entire country. Historic destruction by any measure. Iran is still fighting. Drones still flying, tankers still burning, missiles still landing across the Gulf. No genuine negotiation on the table from Tehran's side. A sailor anchored near Dubai said it best. No safe place, no clear resolution. Nobody knows how this ends. That gap between military dominance and actual peace is the defining problem of this entire conflict. Winning battles and ending wars are two completely different things. You can sink every ship Iran has and still not break the will to keep fighting with whatever is left. Washington is winning every engagement. The Strait is still closed. Oil is still above $118. The tankers are still on fire. So what actually ends this? Is there a deal Iran accepts before the economic pain becomes unbearable, or has this already gone too far for any negotiated outcome to hold together? Drop your answer in the comments, and subscribe now because this story moves fast and the next development could break at any hour.